Way past strange. This ghost makes house calls. Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell was an extremely accomplished physician. His contemporaries considered him a genius the way Benjamin Franklin, another famous Philadelphia resident, had been. I'll tell you more about the man and his life later on. Right now, we'll focus on one event in his life that stands out from the others. It happened in the late 1800s on a bitterly cold winter night in Philadelphia. Dr. Mitchell had gone to bed, weary from a long day with his patients. He fell asleep while reading a book. Suddenly, he was awakened by the ringing of the front doorbell. The maid had already gone to bed, so Dr. Mitchell decided to answer it himself. When he first opened the door, Mitchell noticed that it was snowing quite heavily. Through the swirls of snow, he saw a little girl standing on the doorstep. She was thin and shabbily dressed. Her worn-out shoes were soaked through. Her only protection against the harsh elements was an old shawl, with a faded pattern of red roses dripping against her light dress. The girl looked up at the doctor and frantically said, "My mother is very sick, sir. Won't you come, please?" Mitchell was reluctant at first. It wasn't because of the weather. By this time, he was already a famous neurologist and no longer in general practice. He suggested that the little girl go to another doctor. Unfortunately, there were no other doctors nearby, and the little girl insisted her mother get immediate attention. The doctor agreed and went back upstairs to get dressed. He came back down and followed the girl to her mother. They finally came to a tenement district several blocks away. This was a real garbage place. Mitchell followed the girl into a worn-down apartment building. He was told they lived on the top floor. On the long walk upstairs, Dr. Mitchell said to the girl, "You had better change your clothes, youngster, as soon as we're there, or you will be as sick as your mother." They went into the dingy room where the girl and her mother lived. Sure enough, the girl's mother was lying on a bed with high fever. You didn't need to be a doctor to see that the woman was deathly ill. As Mitchell attended to the woman, he saw from the corner of his eye that the girl took his advice. He saw her take off her wet shoes and shawl and put them in a closet. After that, he had no time to look at the girl. The doctor was now treating a very serious case of pneumonia. After completing the examination, the doctor wrote out a prescription. "I believe you should send your daughter for this right away," the doctor said. The woman looked at him funny. "My daughter?" she asked. "I mean the little girl who brought me here," he explained. The sick woman said painfully, "My daughter died a month ago." Dr. Mitchell knew the woman was sick, and it could have been delirium, but he knew she wasn't lying. "There was a little girl here," he said. "She came in with me and put her wet shoes and shawl in that closet." "Yes, they're in that closet," the mother replied. "They have been ever since she died. I just couldn't throw them away." The doctor went to the closet and opened the door. The shoes and shawl were in there all right, but there was one big difference. They weren't at all wet from the snow. As a matter of fact, they were quite warm and dry. Dr. Mitchell was mystified, but he didn't have time to focus on that. He needed to get the prescription filled for his patient. It took many return visits over a period of many weeks, but he helped the woman beat her illness. He did some research on the side and verified the woman's story. Her daughter really had died a month before his first visit. No explanation of this phenomenon ever fully satisfied Dr. Mitchell. All he knew were the facts. He saved the life of a patient he didn't know until a little girl came to his door, took him to her mother, then disappeared. Different theories have been given for the little girl's appearance. Was she a projection of her mother's mind, sent to the house of a well-known doctor? Or was this little girl an actual ghostly spirit who came back to save her mother? In this case, how it happened isn't nearly as relevant as what happened. The important thing is that the woman was saved and hopefully found some consolation in the loss of her child. About Dr. Mitchell. It's important to state that Dr. Silas Mitchell was not a nut, nor did he want to make a name for himself with this story. He had already been a well-known and respected individual before this event. Silas was born in Philadelphia in 1829. His father, John, was a prominent physician and writer. Silas got his MD in 1850. The list of medical honors he received in his lifetime is too long to get into. During the Civil War, he was the director of treatment of nervous injuries at Turner's Lane Hospital in Philadelphia. Towards the end of the war, he became a specialist in neurology, pretty much inventing this field of study as we know it. Mitchell pioneered the rest cure for cases now referred to as psychiatric. As a matter of fact, Mitchell's work was a big influence on Sigmund Freud, the father of psychology. Personally, Silas was a happily married man with children. He was married twice. His first wife died. They had 2 sons together. His second wife gave him 1 daughter. Wife number 2 lived only a week after Silas's funeral. Throughout his life, Silas Mitchell was always in high social circles. His sons did well in life. His daughter died unmarried at the age of 22. Had she lived longer, she most certainly would have enjoyed a rich life. Mitchell wrote medical textbooks in the 1870s, but his passion for fictional writing began in 1866. He covered a wide range, including children's stories, historical fiction, and poetry. Towards the end of the 19th century, Mitchell was one of America's best-liked and most successful authors. How do we know this story is real? Dr. Mitchell, based on what we know about him, was a level-headed person. He was pretty happy in life and didn't need the money or notoriety a ghost encounter would have given him. We also know that he, personally, had some involvement in developing the story. He certainly tried to ignore the ghost story after it came out, but he definitely didn't make a statement saying it was false. He simply chose to say nothing about it whatsoever. If this story was just something that came out of the mind of a fiction writer, you've got to keep this in mind. Why wouldn't he have embraced it? People liked hearing about this back then and even now. It's something that has outlived everything else about him. It's been said that Dr. Mitchell wrote a newspaper article about this incident in the 1880s. I don't know if this is true. If it is, though, what came next would make sense. In 1892, he published a book called Characteristics. In this book, there was a story about a man who told the fantastic story of the little ghost girl, only to be constantly bothered by believers and disbelievers and unable to stop the story. In this context, it would seem Dr. Mitchell was writing about himself. What reasons would Mitchell have in playing down his ghost encounter? There are 2 main factors to consider. First, I think he wanted people to respect his privacy and the privacy of the unnamed mother and daughter. Second, he wouldn't want others to think he was a crazy man. After all, he was the father of neurology. If people thought he was mental, it would destroy his legacy. Also, Silas enjoyed being in his higher circles and wouldn't want to lose those connections. I believe Dr. Mitchell enjoyed his ghostly encounter and always thought it was cool, but he didn't want people to dwell on it and define him. It was just one of those things that he wanted to keep to himself. It was more special that way. When a lot of people catch on to something and blow it out of proportion, it cheapens the experience. The evolution of Mitchell's ghost story. This fun little story quickly took on urban legend status. It's been told and retold by countless people, countless times, and in various forms. In 1930, the story appeared in a book called Dark Trails: Adventures of a Naturalist by G.K. Cherry. In this story, however, Cherry relates that the sick woman was a former servant of the doctor's, although he wasn't sure. This element comes up in a lot of tellings of the story, but we can't be certain. If she had been a former maid or someone close to Mitchell, it would be all the more reason he would want to keep her name out of it. Sherry also claims that Mitchell, like himself, was very skeptical of ghosts. Mitchell's belief in the supernatural changed after that. The next major appearance of this story, told in a different form, appeared in the July 1938 issue of Reader's Digest. It has since appeared as small features in numerous magazines, even comic books. Some things are changed, including the doctor's name, but the basic story is the same. In 1953, it became an after-theater ghost story in every cafe on Broadway. In the many years since, Mitchell's encounter remains a good ghost story, certainly unique for the time it first came out, and always way past strange.